Greetings, chess friends. We have a very exciting next few videos where I'm going to cover my games from the 2024 Menorca Open. Really fun event. Let's get into the first game, and I'll chat a bit about the event and share a few stories and definitely some fun games. Due to me being in the lower half of the group, I had to play quite a bit up, and I have black pieces versus Grandmaster Daniel Dardha. He is roughly number 120 in the world. So really exciting. I love the first round or early round opportunities you get in these tournaments. Roughly where I stand, you always seem to play IM or GM. So was really excited, and my advice, don't be afraid. So, okay, first kind of interesting moment. He plays the English. So E3 and then B3. So this is, a modern, exciting type of thing, likely trying to get a player of my rating kind of out of their comfort zone. But I felt like this was no big deal. Usually white eventually does play D4. So knight C3, B6, capture, and pawn takes back. At this moment now, after c5, I think white is really forced to play d4. For example, you really can't castle here, and for kind of players newer to chess, I would say this is a very important moment. The pawn coming to d4, capture, and wherever the knight moves, really uncomfortable. And any seasoned player would already feel the problem here. This d pawn is really cramping white's position. You have to move the knight, perhaps another time. And if the move d3 lands, this is just winning material. So d4 it is. I played knight c6. Engine gives a dubious but a very natural move. Castles and bishop e6. Okay, was feeling pretty good here with the black pieces. You could tell capture, and a capture will lead to this so-called hanging pawn structure. But in general, I felt pretty solid and opening success. The games can go so many ways, and you can really get tripped up versus such a strong player. What's really nice, actually, with this game was broadcast, and chess.com has the timestamps. So that's something that is news to me. I'm seeing actually for the first time. But I recall getting into some time pressure. So let's kind of follow along. So far, so good. 1 hour 13 versus 119. Time control, you get 90 minutes and 30 seconds added per move. Here, an interesting strategic moment, knight a4. This is threatening the pawn, knight and rook, but also opens the bishop up. So kind of a dual purpose move. But I figured the knight leaving the control of the center, the best move was to play knight to e4, which simultaneously guards the pawn, as well as centralizes perhaps some moves like f5 could come one day. Capture. And here it might appear that this pawn is a bit of a problem, or these pawns could be captured, but so far so good. The next move, knight d2, I really did not consider. Easy move to overlook, and let's see, he played that one almost instantly. So here you can see with the timestamp 1 hour 10, and then this move capturing the knight took quite a while, 15 minutes roughly to decide on that. And I think get into a good situation, one pawn down, but really time pressure and the class of my opponent just got to me. So capture, and c4, and was happy to see that this was actually kind of the best way that black could go. Again, this one I had already, in the 15 minutes preceding, thinking of knight d2, I was ready to play c4, and was essentially just giving the pawn. This is a pawn sacrifice. Queen takes queen, rook takes, bishop takes, white is up a pawn. But it seems actually that black's pieces are better placed, and there's some immediate threats after knight b4. So another exclamation point from the chess.com engine, but you can just see that black's pieces are perfectly coordinated and a little bit better. We're immediately threatening the a2 pawn, and really this rook is left out, and this knight a bit misplaced. So was feeling good to draw this game. Was kind of thinking the game was equal, and I would be very happy to hold with black in the first round versus such a strong player. Capture, capture. Bishop d4, a good move. Putting the pawn on a3 really probably even just makes it more likely to get captured. For example, knight d3, you can feel the rook is active, the knight is just deep in white's territory, the bishop threatening the pawn. Very likely that two top players, this would be a draw. So bishop d4. And from now on, you can see only about 10 minutes difference, but I think that really starts to increase, and my opponent just handles it so much better. This is really the class of grandmasters versus a player in the 21, 22, 2300s. So really instructional. A6, this just took too long. Same move, but faster. So a6. Also wanted to point out rook c2. This I was definitely calculating. Just couldn't decide. Maybe a little hesitation because of the positive feeling I was having about this game being a draw, or even somehow maybe having a slight edge. So a little too optimistic though. But a6 was good. Again, just threatening this pawn. Really not too fancy. And then you can imagine a 4 versus 3 on the king side, like this. 4 versus 3 is very, very often a draw. With rooks, it's easy. Would be feeling good there if we can get that a2 pawn. So rook c6, maybe not the best. Here, rook d2. Again, a very logical move. I don't recall why I wasn't playing this move. It feels so natural to get the rook to the 7th rank. But rook c6, also a very human move. And my opponent plays an excellent move here, a4. Yeah, this not only gets the pawn out of harm's way, but also threatens to play a5, cementing that knight in. And now, the bishop well placed, the knight getting entrenched, and the pawn out of danger. So I think this is where I start to really crumble a little bit. We played rook c6 quickly, and then this move takes about 5 minutes, and not the best. Perhaps here, f6 feels really difficult for a human to play. Perhaps a5. That would be a human logical move. We just stop a5 by white and support our knight with the pawn. Still good chances to draw here, although white is slightly better. So the game goes like this. Bishop f6. I thought this was really disrupting him, but taking this is absolutely no matter. And that's maybe what I didn't understand until this moment. So I started to realize it, though, because here we take a long, long time. And perhaps the move that puts me in a losing situation just because of the clock. There's no time coming back, just the 30-second increment. So I go from 31 and a half minutes to 14, let's say. Just way too much time taken there. I was nervous, and I could sense the tide had turned a bit after a5. So just got to play a little faster, I think, is the lesson for me. But let's see how my opponent really outplayed me. And still, black is not just out of it. But you can feel by the clock here, 14 minutes down to 10. And there's still going to be tricks. Even if we get to some rook and knight versus rook and knight type of game, or rook endgame, it's just going to be more decisions to make. So I can't go from 30 minutes down to 10 so quickly in 2 moves. But bishop takes f6, and there, again, weakening a little bit. So now the advantages are starting to add up for white. You're up a pawn. Now black has these doubled pawns. Every little detail matters. The only thing black has going for us is that knight threatening the pawn and the rook on the 7th rank. But he really weaves a nice net here with g4. And eventually, knight takes pawn. He weaves a mating net. Can you believe it in this position? So what really was black to do? Here, rook c6. This, again, way too much time taken. 9 minutes, still manageable, but down to 2. You can tell I was nervous, and an inaccurate move. The engine here is giving a move like knight c4. My opponent mentioned if we had gotten down to some 4 versus 3 endgame, that it's actually easier to draw with the doubled f pawns. Another friend of mine, a strong player, also mentioned that during a conversation about this game. So it's easier, which was really shocking to me. Good information to keep drawing that is easier with 3 versus 4 with double pawns. So here we go. Knight b3, again, human move. I was just thinking the pawn, and my opponent just really outclassed me right here. Knight e7 hits the rook, and then knight f5, and we're nearly mated. We are checkmated here. So really, that's where the game slipped away. Let's see a bit. Just in this little bit here, equal material, but rook c6, knight b3, knight e7, and white is winning. Check. The only move is king g2. But here, again, knight f5. Picture it happening. The only move is king g6, and then rook g8, and that would be checkmate. Black can survive a little bit. You can see the time really playing a factor now. So h6, not a fun move to play. Engine says h5 was best. But really black is in trouble here. So okay, so here we go. It gets ugly. Rook h8 again, threatening to take with check. The knight and rook are so powerful. The earlier move g4 also nice inclusion. So knight f5 check. Rook h8, threatening the pawn. h5, rook h6, rook takes, king g6. Here, I suppose I could take the pawn, but knight g3 really was the kind of cool finish where he's just threatening to checkmate me with one of the pawns. So king g6, rook h6, king g5, and a nice touch, king h3. It's kind of also a fun note to end the game with a king move. Usually doesn't happen like that. The move f4 is threatened, and although we can really throw things away and stop it, but it's just, there's no use here. Game is over. I spoke with Daniel after the game and even later in the week. Really nice guy. He played some really nice games, and in general, I think finished the last round loss, but was right there at the top on the top board. So really a cool experience for me. A close game, but in the end, really got outclassed at the key moment by a much stronger player. So really, this moment going from 30 minutes down to 2 in just a few moves. So that was obviously not handled well, but it's a good lesson. Also, the chances that he was able to generate. He mentioned in the postmortem just not allowing the knight to get to the d file. So maybe some move like rook d2 at some moment here. Now it's already too dangerous. So just not letting the knight get to the d file and threaten knight f5. That's the key square that he was going for. So yeah, interesting stuff. Stay tuned for the next game where we get to play a little bit lower opponent. Certainly a challenging game. Thank you very much.